Greetings, brothers and sisters. So today we continue from where we ended last time. But before we get into it, my name is Helen, and today's commentary is titled David and the Holy Bread. So from where we ended last time, David has just separated from his covenant friend Jonathan with a heavy heart, but then he knows that he needed to run away because the father of his best friend, King Saul, planned to have David killed, and he had confirmed his fears through the friend. So at this particular time, King James Version puts it that David deceives Ahimelech, Ahimelech being the priest, one of the vessels through which God would reveal his plan or his purpose at any particular point. So David runs to the priest and deceives him, saying that the king had commanded him on an errand to collect bread for the men. And we also need to take note of the fact that Ahimelech was reserved, because the first comment that the priest asks David is, why is he alone and with no man with him? And David presses the fact that he was on an errand and he did not bring himself. So Ahimelech tells him that there was no bread for him to partake of, and the only bread that was present was that which was called the hallow bread, or the holy bread as we are calling it today. And this is the bread that I believe would be set aside for special occasions, when they had come with their hearts consecrated and their bodies undefiled for a particular amount of time, because of the ruse that Ahimelech tells David, saying that he had hoped that him and his men had not entertained women for the time being. And David affirms him, saying that for the time that they were set in this region waiting for war, they had not been with any women. So Ahimelech gives him the holy bread, and later David comes back again and asks for a sword, telling Ahimelech that I do not have any we call it? Yes, we would call it sword. He didn't have any ammunition. Yes, I was going to use ammunition at that point. And Ahimelech gives David the sword, and David says this was the best thing, like there was nothing compared, obviously, in the whole land of Israel at that point, with the sword that was retrieved from the giant Goliath. Before I proceed to tell what happens next, I would want to highlight the fact that David could have gone to his father's house. David could have walked into any household of any Israelite at this point, because he was a household name, and he would have found solace. Most likely he would have found the food that he needed for the time that he was going to be in the caves or hiding away from King Saul. But he chose to go to the vessel through which God had chosen to speak through. And that should actually highlight something in all of us' minds, to say, whenever we are found at the end of ourselves, whenever we feel like we are standing by ourselves, Jonathan could do nothing for David at that point. But he knew that the place where he could find protection, the place where he could find safety, the place where he could find food is in the presence of God, is in the house of God. And I'm sure that gave him a sense of God's presence and a reminder, by holding that sword that he had retrieved from Goliath, that God was with him even in this moment, in this season, when he felt that he had to defend himself against a king who held all the power in all of Israel, humanly speaking. But David knew that he was anointed and God had chosen him, and even his actions in this chapter, they highlight how convinced, how convicted he was that God was with him. in the concluding passages of this chapter 21, David decides to run to Gath, and when the king of Gath sees him, or before that, the servants of the king of Gath sees him, and they say, this is the man that had killed. They remember David as the man that had slayed the Philistine, and upon hearing that, David knew that they would most likely definitely want to kill him, and to avoid that, he decided to pretend to be insane. When the king of Gath saw that David was pretending to be mad, he exclaims and says, of what use? Of what use is a madman to me? And after hearing that, David knew obviously that, okay, this man will not, he will not take him in as a servant or as a slave. So he departs, and we shall continue on what happens after that. So, brothers and sisters, stay blessed, and I pray that we will be reminded that even in moments when we feel like we are standing alone, we are not alone. Let us learn to always run back to God. Stay blessed.